Hello, friends, and I hope you are having a wonderful week so far. So, I wanted to talk a bit about fear and the subtle ways that it might be showing up in your life, that it may be driving you even. A few weeks ago, I did a couple of videos about fear and anger. And of course, talking about and identifying emotions is a big part of my career, my chosen career. And And so I'm always kind of looking at the nuances of them and looking at how they show up in my own life, as well as in the lives of people that I work with and in the world at large, because we're all being driven by our emotions, whether we believe it or not, and whether we like it or not. And fear, of course, is it's it's the basic preservation instinct, the self-preservation instinct, the survival instinct. It's what gets enacted when we feel like there's a threat and we need to protect ourselves from that. But over millions of years of our evolution, fear has really become very nuanced in the world that we live in now and in our daily lives. And so I think it is worth kind of teasing apart some of these ways that fear shows up. So the one I'm thinking about today is it is rooted in the survival instinct, and it's the scarcity mindset, the scarcity and the lack mindset. And unfortunately, I would say that most people in the US suffer with some version of this scarcity mindset, sometimes in a chronic way. And and I would say that it's actually part of the fabric of capitalism itself, the economic system in which we are operating. There's this idea in capitalism that competition is a healthy thing, and I don't disagree with that. But the way it's presented is, well, it's based on social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. And we can look at it in the example of chimpanzees, because that a lot of times this example from evolutionary biology is used of how chimpanzees compete in the jungle, and it's pretty vicious. And there's a winner and a loser, and not everybody gets the banana every time. And here we are now in the 21st century, and we're in many ways operating using the same principles in our day-to-day life in this capitalistic system, except it's called the rat race. And the idea is that there's a limited amount of cheese, and so millions of rats are fighting each other uphill, in this ongoing battle in order to get this limited amount of cheese, this finite amount of cheese. And ultimately, of course, the people who get the cheese start hoarding the cheese because, well, that's what you're going to do. You're going to hoard the cheese because other people are going to try to take it away from you if you don't. You better store a lot of cheese so you'll feel secure. So, this is kind of the world we're living in now, right? It's like there are a few people, a few rats who, um, either because of their birth or good fortune, have managed to hoard a lot of cheese. And then there are a lot of rats who are scrambling, who are caught up in a struggle, who are still pushing forward to try to get their little piece of cheese, because we all want our cheese. But I mean, this system isn't really providing security or well-being ultimately for anyone, truly. And so the illusion, though, is that we have to keep fighting this fight. We have to keep duking it out, battling it out day in and day out in order to get our little piece of cheese, or we won't survive. That is the scarcity mentality. And again, like, it doesn't really matter if you're at the top or you're closer to the bottom, like, the energy is the same. It's all coming from this frantic sense of competition for these finite resources. And there's a winner and there are many losers, and that's just how the game is played. Now, what's interesting to me though is that in the millions of years that we've evolved from early primates, we've developed a lot more abilities. I mean, invention, innovation. We've adapted to so many challenges and forms of adversity. And we've also developed this part of our mind that is, well, if you think about it as the space in which meditation happens, it's a space of tranquility and inner peace that anyone can access anytime, really. I mean, all you have to do is turn on a headspace recording and you can find your way to that place, that space. So we're not chimpanzees and we're not rats, and yet we're still kind of operating as if we're one of those. And so if we look back at the rat metaphor, the rat analogy, instead of constantly fighting uphill, fighting this uphill battle against each other to try to hoard as much cheese as possible. Well, I mean, what if instead you got your own cow? I mean, then you wouldn't need to rely on this finite little spot of cheese that everyone's fighting over. Okay, now, the cow it represents really something completely outside the rat race, right? Like, perhaps, in other words, what I'm saying is maybe there's another way. Maybe we are fighting out a rat race in our minds, and maybe in fact it's not necessary. The fact is we don't live in the jungle anymore, and we know how to farm. We know how to raise our own food. We know how to, I mean, we have so many ways of creating what we need, of getting our needs met. We are extremely resourceful. And yet we're operating from this scarcity mindset, which is that we're not resourceful. We act as if we're not resourceful, and we have to completely fight it out all the time in order to get the most and keep what we have. And so, again, it's like, are the people at the very top who are hoarding all this stuff, are they actually secure? I don't know. I mean, I'm not one of them, so I can't tell you. But something tells me that if they were, then they wouldn't need to hoard. It's just a wild guess. But so partly what I'm saying, though, is that maybe this rat race that we all have been buying into is really outdated, like a really outdated, like millions of years outdated. And that if we actually if we could rely on our amazing wits, our wits and our inner resources, which I'm going to talk more about in a second, that we might be able to opt out of the rat race. In other words, maybe there's another way. Now, opting out of the rat race does not mean quitting your job. That's not what I'm saying. But it's a different way of approaching the world that we live in, the economic system that we live in, and the workplace that you are in every day. Because part of this rat race, it perpetuates this franticness, this urgency, this rush, this chase, this sense of emergency all the time, and that equates to chronic stress and burnout, and something that a lot of people are suffering with right now because of the pandemic, which is feeling those people who are still unemployed, still employed, feeling completely overwhelmed and overworked and burnout. And and of course, the people who may not be working right now or who are looking for work are in a sense of fear as well. It's that again, it's the fear of not making it, the fear of ending up homeless or what have you. So, how do we turn around this scarcity mindset? I mean, it would seem to be the truth, right? That you need to be able to hoard a certain amount of resources in order to be okay. I mean, that's what we have been led to believe. But I want to propose that perhaps that's not the whole truth. And I'm not saying that we don't need money. I'm not saying that. That is the system that we're currently living in. But what if you could trust that you were going to be okay, that you were going to be provided for? And, I'll just use this example of when I was myself, I had a period of unemployment, and it was not long after the real estate crash of 2008. And I just happened to be between jobs. And I had never had a problem getting jobs before. That had never been my problem. Whenever I needed a job, I found a job, and but this was different. Suddenly there were no jobs, or I was looking everywhere. I was sending out applications everywhere, left and right every day, and not hearing back. And it was really scary because, again, I had never had this problem of like getting some kind of income. Maybe it wasn't my dream job. Maybe it was some kind of field that it wasn't enough money per se, but I always found something. So I realized, though, at some point that panicking wasn't going to get me anywhere. And, sometimes it's in those moments of extreme uncertainty, or when things just seem to be, the rug seems to be pulled out from underneath you, that, well, there's nothing to do except surrender. I mean, there's really nothing to do. Surrender. And I did a lot of surrendering. And what I found, though, is that when I was able to surrender, stop panicking, that I actually felt okay. And not just okay, but blessed and secure. And and I had this feeling that, I was going to be okay, even though I couldn't see where the next job was going to come from. But somehow having everything removed left it left me in a place where I really had no choice but to surrender. And in doing so, I felt free. Now, I'm not saying I felt free every day, because there were still moments of panic here and there, but for the most part, I trusted that something would show up, and eventually something did. And so what I'm pointing to is that you can trust. You can trust in your own resources, your own inner resources, that you can enjoy well-being, whether you have money coming in or not. And it doesn't mean that you might not have fear around that from time to time, but well-being is not contingent on whether you have a job or not. It actually isn't. It's also not contingent on how much money is in your bank account. It's not contingent on whether you have $1 million in the bank or not. It really isn't. And so if you've ever had that experience of seeing that you're really okay, even if you have no money, or you don't know where the next paycheck is coming from, or what have you, then you understand that scarcity is in the mind, as is abundance. And it's really a cup half full, cup half empty situation. You can have no money coming in and have abundance. You can have billions of dollars and live in scarcity, which again, can look like hoarding, or how do I keep this money? Now that I've made this money, how do I keep this money and keep other people from getting this money? That's actually, again, that's not abundance. That's scarcity. So it's just something to think about in terms of, how might scarcity be showing up in your life in different ways, and whether you are currently unemployed, or if you do have a job but you feel like you're a part of this rat race. you know, it 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 becomes, if you're able to see that it's not necessary to struggle so much, that there's always another way. There's You can get your own cow, or you can start fishing, or whatever that resource is. There's always another way. You don't have to be fighting it uphill for the one piece of cheese. When you see that, and when you see that you're okay and your well-being is not attached to your finances, or to, whether you have a job or not, or which job you have, it just can be so liberating and relaxing. And so many people, I feel, might be spared a lot of stress and struggle if they understood that their resources were actually within them, and had less to do with their net worth. So that's just what was on my mind this week, and I wanted to share it. And I'm going to be doing a series of these different kinds of fear, the different ways that fear shows up and maybe sneakily sabotaging you or driving you. And so I would love it if you check back in, and feel free to comment if anything resonates with you. And if you would like any more insights or support or inspiration, feel free to check out my community, Joie de Vivre. And I've left the information about that in the box below. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful week.